Hi, hello everyone. My name's Justin and I'm joined by Rob Doucette from Ottawa.
Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Take a proactive approach to enhance your IT operations user experience. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. So quick introductions. I'm Rob Doucette, VP of Product Management at Martello, responsible for global product strategy. I've also had the pleasure to be joined today by Justin Morter, Technical Sales Manager at Martello. And we also have Christopher Martinson, the champion of Martello IQ at Domino. And he's here to share some of his secrets and best practices and how he's successfully deployed IQ to some of the real world scenarios that we're talking about today. You know, today we hear a lot from prospects and customers that, you know, whether it's alert storms or just too many systems that are in place to do your job, with little visibility across those systems to understand when there are problems, what's impacted or who's impacted. So we're going to talk a little bit about today in terms of how we can take a proactive approach to managing the IT environment and how we can deliver a faster resolution time with an enhanced user experience. So we're going to launch into our first poll to kick things off here. So just looking to see what's the primary pain point that has brought you to the webinar today that you're interested in. And while you take some time to answer that question, I'll just kind of go over the agenda. So I'll provide a brief introduction to Martello for those who may be new to Martello. We're going to go through how we gather some of this actionable data from the current systems that you're using, looking at streamlining the flow of those alerts. Justin will then share some tips in terms of how we can create effective and meaningful dashboards, as well as some reports that may be interesting for other stakeholders within the business. And we'll close out with some discussions around enhancing the user experience. We'll leave some time for some questions.
And I'm just going to share the results for you. And you can see the majority of people are here today about creating and maintaining dashboards. No pressure on my side of the presentation then. And improving user experience is a good common goal for a lot of people as well.
Perfect. Just a quick introduction for Martello. So Martello was founded in 2009. We're headquartered in Ottawa. We've been growing rather quickly the last couple of years, both through organic growth, but also through some acquisitions. Both Justin and I have joined Martello through the acquisition of a company called Civision about 1.5 years ago, which is where IQ and our IT Ops solution was derived from. And fundamentally, we offer products and solutions for service providers as well as large enterprises that helps them manage the delivery of real-time services, whether that's to employees in the case of enterprises or customers in the case of an MSP or service provider model. Deployed globally around the world, just about every country, varying size of enterprise networks to really help provide visibility in how well services are being delivered, and when they're not, you know, who's impacted and what can we do to resolve it. So there's 4 key elements that we're going to walk through here, and you know, these kind of are aligned with the rollout of how we see a company getting a handle around their multiple systems and the alerts and health that's coming out of that. So the first thing that we can help to do with Martello IQ is the unification of IT operational data. The first challenge that we see, a lot of teams have to use multiple tools to get best of breed functionality for different parts of the IT environment, whether that's, you know, storage versus network versus cloud versus hybrid. The reality is many of you are dealing with a growing number of tools with little visibility across all of them from one view. So the first thing we can do is just to gather all that information into one repository, one set of dashboards, and one way to search through that data, which then gives you a consolidated view into all of the alerts that are coming from all these systems. So we have, at this point, we have some capabilities in terms of giving you some better visibility over those alerts that are coming in from all those systems instead of having to track them down in each of the systems' portals or reporting engines. Next step we see is to take some of that information and organize it into ways that are meaningful for your business. Sometimes that's by department, sometimes that's by geography, Sometimes that's by customers for MSPs or enterprises that might be treating departments as internal customers. And all that leads us to the end of having a service view of your environment. And what we mean by that is mapping the IT components or the IT infrastructure to the business demands that has been put on IT. That way, as these alerts are coming in and states are changing for various components, whether those are virtual machines or network devices, we don't need to go off on a huge investigative search to try and find out what the impact is. We've modeled that as a service, and we understand immediately what the impact is, which helps us understand how we should triage this. Is this something that needs to be dealt with ASAP, or can it be kind of put on the back burner and dealt with later because there are more pressing things to look at? So if we jump into the IT Ops Management solution that we're talking about today, we're talking about Martello IQ. And again, we provide a way to consolidate all of your IT operational data into a single repository, which allows you to create some personalized dashboards with all that data for the purposes of streamlining alert management and noise reduction, as I mentioned, but also moving towards service and application modeling so that we understand which services and which applications may be impacted when a certain device or part of IT becomes unavailable. We'll also talk a little bit about how we can tie into existing systems that you may be using, whether that's an ITSM system like ServiceNow, but also some workflows that we can interact with from a PowerShell perspective, which may also help you interact with tools that your teams are already accustomed to using. Getting into alert correlation and effective dashboards, we have the ability, again, as I mentioned, to normalize the alerts. So we're not, when we pull all this data into a single repository, we're not then giving you, well, here are your System Center alerts and here's your SolarWinds alerts. We can kind of break it down that way, but we can also deliver a single alert view that's normalized, making it much easier for your teams to deal with these regardless of where they came from. Easy to correlate, easy to communicate to other stakeholders within the company. And again, as I mentioned, if that's something that your organization is using, we can automatically push these into your service management tool as well, so that incidents are created there, bringing to surface some issues that need to be resolved right to your help desk teams. So if we look in more detail now in terms of how we're gathering and looking at this information, let's take a look at some scenarios here. So the first scenario that we will look at is, what types of data can we look at? So just about everything from the IT ops side, we can consume and look at here, right? So, we know that we have some number of problems happening in the IT environment, hopefully not too many, but, it's a natural part of IT that we're going to have some issues that come up on servers, network devices, that sort of thing. We have a monitoring tool, whether that's something like System Center or SolarWinds or Azure Monitor, that picks up these problems. And obviously we get a potential large number of these things happening, right, without understanding the impact. So the admin gets a notification. We try and find root cause based on these problems, but fundamentally we want to make sure that we can gather data from all of the monitoring tools that you use, whether that's storage, network, cloud, hybrid cloud, and make sure that you have visibility into all of these data sources. Leading into scenario two, what do I need to do with this data? This is where we see, Helpdesk is often left in the dark here, where, or on the other side, they're faced with an alert storm, right? We know that even in the cleanest IT environments, there are typically a tremendous number of alerts that are being generated. Many of them are not, signal, they're just noise, something that doesn't really require actionable follow-up. And again, we'll talk a little bit as we go through the course of this presentation, how, again, that service model can provide immediate impact analysis, hide the noise of all those alerts, and notify Helpdesk through an incident creation that there's something that you need to look at without being bombarded with an alert storm. So we have the capability of understanding impact, communicating that into the Helpdesk, and saying something like, well, we have a degradation with this particular application or service, and here are the symptoms, which would be the alerts, instead of the other way around where we get a whole stream of alerts and we try and figure out what the impact is. And again, all this, we hear over and over again about alert fatigue. Too many alerts coming in, very difficult to understand what the impact is. So we're either completely overwhelmed by alerts, or what often happens is there's just so many alerts that people become desensitized to it. We're not looking at it, and we miss really important things that were in that alert storm. So by having a proactive view in terms of aligning this with the applications and services that your business depends on, that IT delivers, we can make sure that you have immediate impact analysis here, integration with service management, all this kind of driving a much faster resolution time when these things do bubble up to the surface. So a couple best practices here to help with these alert storms. So the first thing we need to do, as I mentioned earlier on, we need to make sure that we're capturing all the data from the tools that you're using. We have out-of-the-box integrations for most of the popular IT management systems that you may be using. We also have the capabilities to ingest data directly through API mechanisms for tools that we may not cover, or homegrown tools that you may be using. And then we want to drive that into a set of summary dashboards, but also saved searches. So saved searches is just a more ad hoc way to look for things with certain keywords or device names or IP addresses, which can quickly bubble up things that you may be kind of keeping an eye on if you have a problematic component in your environment that you just want to keep an eye on. And then we can look at some more custom dashboards based on maybe some of the needs of your other teams that you're interacting with, so we can make sure that they're getting the information that they need in the format that they need. And all this to make sure that all the key stakeholders that need to be informed are informed without having to be a victim of these alert storms. So with all that, I'm going to pass the baton to Justin, who's going to walk us through a little bit on the dashboarding and reporting side in terms of how we can surface some of this information that you can take action on.
Thanks, Rob. So hopefully for those of you watching along, scenario 1 and scenario 2, you see yourself relatively in there. We have an actual live user who, just like you, is facing these challenges daily with one of our customers out there. Chris, hopefully you're still on audio here. I don't know if you want to take a few minutes just to explain a little bit of some of the challenges you had around your dashboarding and reporting within Domino, and how you potentially solved that.
Yeah, of course. This particular client of mine were using SCOM as their main monitoring tool and alert channeling tool. They were also using PRTG for things outside of the Microsoft infrastructure and Spectra, and they were also starting to evaluate Azure Monitor and how they can generate alerts upon their growing Azure apps that they were building. And we felt that we needed to move away from SCOM as the unified alerting solution, because it's too complex, it's quite legacy by now, and we needed a more flexible solution. So we were looking at Martello IQ, and we integrated it with SCOM, Azure, and PRTG, and it fetched all the data. It's super fast. We have all the CIs from each and every component and environment, and from there we just drag and drop into dashboards. We have moved the alert channeling to IQ entirely. So SCOM is now, from being the major monitoring components, is just a sub-component for monitoring at the client. So IQ is the umbrella, the alert channeling, and the dashboarding solution. And I think many of you listening have been working with the SCOM reports, and if you watch Justin build some dashboards in IQ here, you'll know and see the difference. It's remarkable. So and also I would like to say, because of the lack of monitoring Azure capabilities in SCOM, we have completely left the Azure Management Pack and went ahead with the Azure integration for IQ, which also leverages us to say to the dev teams, because they often forgot the ops part of the DevOps. that, hey, you have to create the alert rules because we don't have any management packs for this. And the first responders aren't you guys who built the apps. So you make the rules and we'll see that they are alerted upon, and whatever dashboards you need, here are all the components, all the CIs. We can build them for you, but it's also so simple so that you can build them yourself. So with the role-based delegation, they can do that.
Did you find that by stepping over and showing that to them, that it became more of a joy for them to see the monitoring, to visibly get sort of feedback on their systems? I mean, compared to your SCOM experience?
Because now they have the ability to, they know what they want to see. It's not a management pack like it was before, or they have to ask operations for each and every single bit of data. They have it all in Azure in the resource group. We bring it into IQ, and they can create dashes from there. They can select the metrics that they're interested in their apps, and also generate that's another very good thing. We create a set name of, this is what you call the critical alerts that needs to go to the first responder team. So we dynamically act upon that as long as they follow the naming convention. If they go aside from the naming convention, they can create whatever rules and alerts they like without having to disturb the first responders. So they are much more involved in the ops part of the DevOps thing. So that's a very big advantage we have now.
Yeah, it does sound like you're approaching monitoring slightly different than the old SCOM way, which is put a management pack in there, blasted with a lot of rules, and then turn off the ones you don't want till you get what you're doing. You're actually the other way, where the team comes in and tells you what they want to monitor, what they find is more interesting, which I've noticed in other customers as well is a much bigger buy-in, right? If they know exactly what they're monitoring. I mean, there's many sessions I've had with existing customers who, when they go and talk to the target audience of the data, the target audience says, well, what can I get? And that conversation sort of like, I don't know, let me show you everything and start there, where essentially now the conversation that you've generated is, what do you want? And I'll monitor that. And if that's not good enough, then we'll switch on more monitoring for you till you get what you need.
Exactly.
And you've unleashed it so that they can do it. I think that's one of the key factors that Azure brings in there, right? Is a different mentality to monitoring around this.
Definitely. We began working much more closely together because of this, both the dev and the operations team. So that was very nice to see.
And one of the things I know I talked and I still talk to a lot of customers about is when you build within IQ, which I'll show you guys shortly, a dashboard to generate an alert or notification. It's usually very useful that when someone receives the alert or notification, he knows what to do with it. Now, if he's already brought in to say, I only want to be notified when this happens, that gets a lot easier, and people tend to pick up and be able to work with the notifications rather than getting a notification which they have no clue of what to do with, like you potentially would get out of a mass sort of monitoring package, out of other monitoring tools, essentially. And I think that's something we worked on, is just making sure that the users get the correct notification around their system and knowing what part of the system's affected, because they know the monitors that are being set up in there, which is obviously a cool way to look at it, a different way of looking at monitoring to get more people involved. Obviously, you focused a little bit on Azure Monitor. What I'd like to do now is just throw up a poll to everyone out there as to which cloud providers are you guys actually using. So I'll just take a few minutes to throw that on the screen. Now, it could also be that you're potentially thinking about using, or what the company is looking at, or if you're not using anyone at all, feel free to put that in. Think, the whole organization. So Office 365 obviously sitting in the cloud, and that's when you're working with on-prem solutions, something to keep in mind, that still needs to be monitored, potentially in scenario 2 that Rob passed you by, which is users will complain. So you have to have an answer as to where the problem is. I know Microsoft is generally, about 80% of the time you answer that one, but in reality, it could also be your network component or a server in between. And a lot of companies are trying to spread the risk into multiple clouds. So feel free, to answer with your heart as to which one the company is leading with at the moment. I believe that's end of the poll, so I'm just going to share this one. So it's a very clear winner for Microsoft on this one. If you guys do feel like sharing your reasons for it, please feel free to throw in the questions direct to us or chats to us as to the main decision driver behind that one. If it's pure because technology is already Microsoft oriented, because you guys got a sweet deal, that sort of thing, let us know. Obviously, that doesn't go further on the visibility after this webinar. Right, creating and maintaining effective dashboards, and I'm sure Chris has heard this a lot from me on what some good tips are. So what I just wanted to run through is obviously areas to look at. So first, looking at some challenges. I know we've all attempted to build dashboards for someone at some stage, or we've reused some of the existing dashboards that are out there, or you spent a good half day Google searching how the hell do I show someone some information. Just one of the first problems you run into is what are you trying to achieve with your dashboard? I mean, every solution right now offers a great way to see data, to slice data up. I mean, Power BI is out there, Azure's coming out with some really cool dashboards, but in reality, which ones do you need to show you the information about it? And that's a big challenge for IT leaders at the moment, is not only just using it out of one tool, but trying to get information out of other tools to display it on the screen. I've seen a lot of dashboarding companies come out of there and just go, well, here's a widget and here's an iframe of data from another tool just to show and grasp that together. I think a lot of data lake tools out there are trying to do that, and they don't really focus on actually giving you the ability to understand that information as a problem or be able to act on it. And obviously with Azure and SCOM, in Chris's case, information can lie in different parts of the system that could affect potentially one of your same applications, right? So you may have multiple servers on-prem, and you may have some workloads going into Azure which all support the same application to date because your application team or your DevOps team is trying to use them. So how do you show that information without sending the application owner to multiple screens, different logins, showing him completely different data because one tool shows it better than the other tool? You want to match that information. So just keep in mind, it's always good to talk to your users about how to get that, understanding this is a challenge, and then how to go around fixing it. And I'm a big subscriber of keep it simple. So here's some tips to keep your dashboard simple. Know its purpose, operational short-term goals, something like, can a user find it and fix it? And a user being the user of the dashboard. So that could be an IT administrator or an IT help desk person or whoever's tasked to fix it. That could be a third-party company, right? The faster you can show them a problem or where the problem relies on, the faster they can fix it. And then when you come to do the really cool dashboards, like the SLA reporting dashboards, the greener and more fun they are to do. Metrics, does it happen often? What causes it? A lot of tools will give you a lot of performance metrics. There's a lot of reasons about it. Focus on the ones that really help answer questions for the target audience. So a lot of people love dashboards, platform dashboards with lots of metrics of which disks are filling up, but in reality, when you're looking at a find it, fix it scenario, you only really care about the disk filling up at the moment you have to fix it. A lot of people want to do forecasting dashboards, but if you get your information right at the beginning and you set your thresholds correct in your monitoring platforms correctly, then the need for forecasting becomes less and less because you guys are on top and in control. So that's when metrics is, start changing from performance counters of a computer to how often have I seen this problem? And is this a regular problem? Is this component always causing the problem? Do I have to invest money in that component or get the business to replace that component with maybe a newer version in cloud? Real-time updates. A lot of people forget the importance of the real-time ability because they're too busy trying to fix the problems or handle the alerts. Real-time updates could be a simple scenario I come across, which is a monitoring platform kicks out a lot of alerts. People work on the alerts, go and fix the problems, or at least they do. They close down the alerts in their mailbox or in their system, and they go on their merry way. But if they took 5 seconds more just to look at a real-time dashboard, they would actually see that the problem is still not resolved, potentially because another problem has popped up in that same application on a different server, or a different problem on that server that's also causing them problems. Good example is when you get to business services, people will complain about your email service. You go and fix their email mailbox or the server or the web component, whatever the problem is. However, you forget to check that Active Directory has also got a bit of a problem, and the domain controller that email is responding to make sure people have access is down, which means actually the problem's not fixed, yet you've gone and closed all the alerts. So asking yourself, in a real-time visualization, did I fix the problem, or is there another problem down the line that I need to be at it, and can my users use it again? Just a little touch around that one. When I ask a lot of customers, how do you measure delivery to your users? They tend to give me examples which stem from tickets, how well or how often people complain about a service. I tend to get worried in that conversation because it's an indicator to me that they're not in control of the problem before it becomes a ticket. So they're not even trying to stop asking themselves, can users use the service again? They're just, in a panic until servers are happy, or users are happy about it. So keep that in mind. The better you make your real-time updates, the knock-on effect you have down the path as well. High-level overview of current performance. How are we doing on all of our services? Again, if you fix Exchange but Active Directory still got a problem, just as some examples, are you really putting out the fire, or are you just pouring fuel on it, or doing tasks that are less relevant at that stage? Keeping an over level on the current availability and how components are doing, and how well you're doing on those services also allows you to allocate resources correctly and priority wise. And remember, performance can also be measured from different data sources, like ITSM tools are a really good sort of level of how well you're performing to the business, because that's where users will be measured on complaints. And if you can do that real time versus what monitoring is telling you from an IT perspective, a really good measure of how well your business is doing. Again, understanding the target of the dashboard, I'm not going to go into that, but there are many different people that will use it. Keep in mind, the better you make the dashboard for that person, the more in control they feel around the data, right? And the more you can let go of the monitoring tool and having to fix the problems and become more of a manager of information within your company. And that leads me into the benefits. So, a successful dashboard will display key data that is accurate and up to date for the environment on a one-page screen relevant to the user of the page. These are key concepts we have within IQ today. So those are actual live screenshots you can see from them. I have a live demo environment. If you guys have not had a look at it, drop me an email and we can get you some access to it and information around it. Your dashboard is only valuable as good as your input is. What I mean by that is when we start becoming that one-page screen relevance, a lot of users, I think Chris can atone to it, went out and found out that they were missing data from very specific components to improve that. So SCOM wasn't giving them everything they needed, so they looked into Azure Insights or Azure Monitoring to grab that data, and that fulfilled even further what it is. We noticed when we deployed a lot of new customers that the end user perspective of our service model, the part that actually tells you or synthetically tests if users can actually use it, tends to be grayed out. So we find a lot of customers suddenly run into a question and start asking us, what's a good measure of that? Because some of the tools that they have in place are not giving them that. Either we spend, time unlocking tests or components within those tools, or we do advise them onto, other tools out there like the one we've just recently purchased to help with Office 365 service end user transaction testing as well. If you haven't known about that, feel free to check out our webpage for updates around that specific feature for you. I think that was what I wanted to touch on the dashboarding side. I'm just going to have a quick step over. Rob, I know this slide's not for you. I think this is for me. So I'm just going to pause it here and swap over to my demo environment for you guys. Hopefully this all goes in real time. I just know that my internet connection slows quite a bit down. I can see some counters here going in. This is IQ in its full glory. Just to give you a sneak preview in its background, it's a simple UI in the front end, web-based. As an administrator, you get access to settings, which is technically the back information, which allows you to grab information from multiple data sources. So you can see a list here. These might not make a lot of informational names for you, but this is literally where we can start grabbing data from multiple data sources. And just a tip on this, you may not see a tool that you guys are very familiar with on here. We're working with a lot of our partners. I think some of them are actually on the call today around our API out there, which has just been extended recently to allow PowerShell, JSON, and HTML coding to come in, so it can absorb the information from multiple data sources. It also works with Elastic integrations as well. so that you can grab data, dump it in our central database, much like these integrations will do, and will allow you to visualize that information in data. There's two major ways. If there's a logo on this one, that there's probably a chance that we can also interact with the data in the underlying system. Once you grab all that data, you're greeted with ways to search through the data and focus on it. And this is where you can start seeing lists of your computers, your alerts, your incidences, your services and components that you have on the system as well. You will probably have larger numbers than this out there, but you will have the ability to go through and grab all that data and information in real time. This gives you the ability to Google search through it. So if you're looking for specific components at the time of need to fix it, this tends to become a very handy dashboard that you can go through your 1,000 computers and grab the one individual SQL computer, as you can see, monitored locally by my SCOM component. Or I can have a look at a quick perspective from other systems at the moment that are also monitoring it to see that the network monitoring is saying that I can talk to that component, already helping me to design ways to look at the information. We go a step further to also allow you to share that with the individuals. So again, keeping your dashboards nice and clean. So a lot of our first-time users, and I think Chris was also one to this, will start setting up what we call boards, which is a simple grouping of information. This board unlocks the ability for you to generate notifications around the information. So if you want to see your data as a data center or potentially multiple data centers like I have here, and get an alert against a data center or a grouping within a data center, that's possible as well. So once you've grouped them into these boards, IQ allows you to send out a Slack notification, a Teams notification, an email notification, or just a hook out to your web system to generate a notification on it. You can also hook up to your ITSM tool and generate a ticket. So that's instantly another way that you can inform other users of other tools that there are problems to look at. And our focus is not just to pump all of the live alerts out there. So as you can see, if I was to do that in the last month or potentially last 90 days, I would have generated 112 tickets or 112 notifications to people, when in reality, I'm actually only generating 36 incidences. So we're already funneling the data into your systems to give people actual use to it. And remember, I talked about metrics and providing that at the right time for the right person. So again, you have the ability within our system that if you need to go and have a look at an object or an alert in detail in your underlying system, and you want to, bring the power back to the user of that system. So someone who's used to and accustomed to looking at Azure and Azure monitoring dashboards, you can click from here and go directly to the Azure Monitor interface on what you've clicked, so on the alert. So you're not forced into having to look at it through a very simple view. You can actually dive into your underlying tool, which is tried and tested, and use the dashboarding that's in there to give you that extra information to allow you to do the job you want. Keep in mind, not every business user needs to have that detailed information, so that's only there if needed during it. One other way to look at the data is, instead of grouping it up as a simple box as a data center or a box to represent my email service or my platform service, is to spread it out into our service maps. And within our service maps, you have the ability to look at the same data. So you can see, Exchange is a service I run in multiple data centers. All the servers are spread out. It has a problem, but that problem is not affecting end users. So my end user synthetic transactions using for Exchange, if that's on-prem, probably something out of SCOM or Splunk or AppDynamics or something that's really truly testing that, is coming back with green. So I know the delivery of the service is working for people. And I do know that from an IT perspective, I have to go and probably empty a mailbox or fix a web server, or even look at, at the infrastructure layer, network devices that could be connected that are pathways for my network to talk out there or my application to talk out there. So in this case, very simply drilling down, I can see that Cisco switch. And again, I can drill further and see which part of the Cisco switch, which port, if my underlying tool, in this case Peer-to-G, is showing the information. And I can already start aligning an email to the network team to say, hey guys, are you going to fix that part of Cisco right now, because it's impacting my email service. It's not impacting end users, however, it is impacting the service. And as I mentioned, it's also good to measure how well you're doing on performance. So we have a column in here that not only shows you the numbers of alerts generated, but the numbers of tickets generated at the service as well. So you can see that Exchange, even though it's got some heavy technical problems, I can probably put it on the back burner, because at ServiceNow, I only have one incident created. probably related with that Cisco switch, just taking a random guess without drilling down. However, my hybrid service is showing a completely different scenario. That could be lots of changes planned for it. That could be lots of users affected by it. That could be, a serious amount of complaints where monitoring is actually telling me there's not a lot to worry about. Again, different perspective on the same data that allows me as an IT leader to make snap decisions of where to choose my resources or my time to go at. That's at the real-time view. Now, obviously, when you get the real-time view down and you start getting the green boxes happening a lot longer, then we start talking about the SLA report components. So this is where you can start going in and dissecting the information and finding out when you had downtime and potentially what caused the downtime. And this allows you to run reports out to users or to management to say, hey, this component, my server talking at my network level, has been down the most time in the time period that you're interested in. So potentially either we need to look to replace it, or we need more resources or more training of how to use that product. And that is, the top offender in that day or that month from my system compared to the other ones. So you can see some hosts are turned on and off. From an Azure perspective, you can also see, if put together what the most offending processes or monitors generated from Azure Monitor, or if the computer was turned on and off, which, for people paying for subscriptions for things running, is a very handy way of running a report out there. You don't have to use our interface. All this data is stored internally with us. And if you're used to using tools like Kibana or Grafana, you can pull out some really good reports and dissect the information as well. Some of the stuff that we don't visually do at the moment, but is really easy to pull out, is what's my most common ticket, who worked on the ticket, what's the most common resolve for the ticket, because all of those properties we store, or what's the most common alert, and you can do a comparison on that sort of report as well. And I'd highly recommend doing that per service and not for your entire environment, because remember, the key factor is to keep the information clean and crisp for the attended user. So just showing them you can write reports is great. Giving them an actionable report is even better. Incidences. So you saw on the dashboard that we can show you tickets or incidences referred to in the ITSM tool. They become, as I mentioned, really interesting once you've grouped the information together. A lot of customers come to us and say, can you automate that? Not only can we funnel the alerts, so if you get 100 alerts pumping out on all of the components supporting your application, from an IQ perspective, you'll get one alert saying, hey, the application layer or the end user layer or the infrastructure layer, or if you're unlucky, all three of them are red. That same notification, which is a simple, hey, you need to look at your IQ dashboard in real time now to find out what the problem is, will lead you to all of the alerts. We also do that onto the ITSM part. So you can generate a ticket in ServiceNow or BMC or Topdesk, whichever tools you guys are using that hook up to our system, and we can create that ticket and associate the alerts that generate that ticket automatically. And the net impact of that is obviously you get a lot smarter notifications to people saying, hey, you have a problem, and it's not at disk level anymore, it's actually at application level, and it's going to impact your application because you also have a problem at end user experience that's just click red. So that disk filling up on that one cluster server where you thought you were covered, well, that's caused a domino effect. That means users can't use your application. You will be informed with a ticket to the help desk straight away. And the opposite end is once that ticket is closed, we also can go back to the underlying systems that allow us to do this and lock down the alerts and reset them so that monitoring goes back to being healthy if it's fixed. So that if the next problem comes back up, you get another automation of the ticket going out so people are informed of it. And I know that's one thing that Chris was very looking at when he got IQ in there. Chris, I think you can talk about it. That was one of the main focuses for the team, is just to have this all automated in the background so that once they were happy with monitoring, they got notifications directly to their mailbox so that they could act on them. Have you found that's been very useful for them?
Yeah, and also in part you have the alerts that needs to go 24/7 to the first responders, but also that we can utilize different channels so that the separate dev teams can get their alerts through like Slack or MS Teams channels. Might not be alerts, just notifications that they create in Azure Monitor. So once it's all in place, it's very easy and intuitive to just have a solid alert channeling solution.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was really happy to hear potentially from you at the beginning part of this is that they feel happier about that notification, that they feel that they're responding to it. And from you as an administrator point of view, I know when we talked to you on SCOM, one of your biggest challenges was wading through all the noise. And I think you did an amazing job over the years you work with it, because there's a couple of times I've logged to your system and you were happy to show me where you had, a list of 10 alerts that were live at the moment. Thought that was impressive. And that took years to get there, just wading through all of the alerts and making sure people pick them up. We have some customers out there that are looking at thousands of these things and no one's touching them, or potentially no one knows they have to close them, which leads to another problem where if you're responded to or proactively informed and you can actually physically see it live, that does change the interaction with the system as well.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
Chris,
each quarter you do a management pack, rolling upgrade, and you're there again, rinse and repeat, and taking all the noise away. So yeah, it's a huge difference from before.
Yep. Looking at the time and my next slide, I'm just going to move into the report stuff. I did touch a little bit on the show and tell part, so I'm just going to go a little bit over some components in here. 72% of corporations now require 4 nines or 99.99% minimum uptime. In reality, a lot of you guys are struggling with this because that means your servers or your network devices or your actual components have to be at 99%. I think what a lot of IT departments are starting to brave in these conversations is technically, the reason why you have cloud, the reason why you have clustered components, the reason why you hire very expensive architects to go in and set this stuff up so that it breaks, it stays alive. It's all actually about 99% delivery. I think a lot of people get confused with that. In our IQ product, we do show the amount of reported uptime that the monitoring gives you, i.e. how long it's been red versus green. But the all important factor that a lot of people focus on is the end user availability of it, right? And that end user box, is monitored potentially by a different tool, but is driven by the other tools monitoring. APM monitoring will tell you have a problem. Real infrastructure monitoring will tell you what potentially caused that problem. And don't forget that even though real infrastructure monitoring SLAs tend to become less important when you talk about delivery, they are really important because they drive that delivery part. So keep that in mind for writing your reports up and detecting the performance degradation. Enhancing your IT user experience, that in the end, that's what the combined components is around it, and being able to deliver that. I think, Rob, you wanted to mention something here, which about the digital experience about monitoring now?
Yeah, I think you've set up the conversation well to wrap up on a quick note in terms of what Martello was focused on for the present and going forward. And you may have already seen some of this from Martello, or you certainly will in the future as we go forward. But Justin mentioned often the end user experience in these service models are neglected, mostly because some of the monitoring tools that are in place do a really great job at monitoring application components and infrastructure components, but lack the visibility into how well are users interacting with those services or applications. And this becomes even more critical as applications are moving out of data center deployments into the cloud. So if we look at SaaS applications that organizations are depending on, whether that's the classic Office 365 example, homegrown services built with microservice architectures in Azure, or even more business-oriented tools like Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, there's a need for different tools to manage how well those services and applications are functioning. Especially in the context, we'll use Office 365 as an example. There is no infrastructure that you're managing in your data center anymore, or even in branch offices. It's all in Microsoft's data center. But users will inevitably still run into problems with those applications or with Office 365, but they don't know where that problem is or how to fix it, right? Is it something with my endpoint? Is it something with my ISP? Or is it genuinely a problem with Microsoft? So a different set of tools are needed. And that's what I'm showing here is our focus going forward in these slices here. There's an analytics piece where Martello IQ plays, where we are going to consume all this data from different sources. Justin briefly touched on our most recent acquisition, GSX. So they're a market-leading provider of Office 365 monitoring. So that'll be one of the next data sources that you'll see available into this stack, is real synthetic transactions that show how well are users able to interact with all of the Office 365 applications. And then we'll see enhancements to that story. So that'll tell us, okay, there's some problems going on right now with, let's say, Teams. We'll be able to tell you which users are impacted by that problem, and then also be able to tell you where that problem is, right? What does the path look like between Justin and Teams? You know, is it Justin's Wi-Fi that's letting him down? Is it his local internet provider? Or is it actually something perhaps DNS or routing related, where he's not getting to Azure's front door as quickly as possible? We'll give you visibility into that so that you can quickly understand, you know, where that problem is. So when Justin inevitably calls to complain, you already have this information at your fingertips to share, really speed up the remediation. And then, of course, as we've talked a little bit through this presentation, the need to have visibility into the other data sources is really important as well, right? If Justin is working one day back in an office again, there may be network components between Justin and the service that are impacting Justin's ability to use Teams, right? Is there a problem with a Cisco router at the edge of that branch office, right? And we're going to get that visibility through IQ, through some of the integrations and data sources that Justin talked about and showed earlier. And then we're looking at partnership opportunities on the accelerator front, right? Things that we can drive some of those decisions to say, well, maybe the Cisco router isn't properly prioritizing Teams traffic. Can we provision some policies in that router to make sure that those are taking the precedent that the business wants? So I just want to, we're running really tight on time here, and I know there's been some questions coming in, so let's just jump into a couple questions here. But just to wrap up, you know, we will be following up with a recording of this presentation, as well as an ebook that will dive into more detail about dashboarding, alert management, and some of the topics we've been talking about today. And of course, if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to either Justin, myself, or Chris, or a more general inquiry to our info@martellotech.com, and we'll surely follow up with some answers for you to get you sorted out.
So we had a question on, can we provide a recording link? Yes, you will be reached out to an email with the link once the marketing team has that up and available for you guys. Rob, we have another question here about the product. So do you have a mobile app, or is it just a website?
Yep, so today it is delivered as a web application. It is a responsive design, meaning that it does scale down based on the device that you're using. So it's not admittedly as, you know, slick or as, you know, purpose built for a mobile phone. It will function and scale down appropriately, so the UI automatically adjusts. We do see that more popular on the tablet, for example, where you have a little bit more real estate to kind of peruse and navigate these dashboards, but that would be something that you're likely to see in our future roadmap as we move down this path.
Yeah, I think from experience we have on our other solutions is one of the big key factors around mobile is the push notification system. So just again, to reiterate, we do have a triggering system within the tool that allows you to fire off a script, PowerShell script, or you can target that towards using a script towards whatever webhooks you have. So there is a way to reuse some of the stuff you have in place right now, and effectively combine that with being able to see the dashboard or your service map on your mobile if the web site is available to the user from that location. Obviously, you know, stay tuned for future with us. The last question, I think, to wrap up here is, will the system, I believe that's Martello IQ, be able to use an email notification as input as opposed to normal API interface, as some of the systems that we have may not have an API interface itself?
Great question, one we've heard before. So right now you cannot use IQ as an email trap. That would be something we'd love to kind of talk about in more detail, because we realize that some of these older legacy systems may not have support for the level of API support needed to get those alerts out. Today, not a capability, but we'd love to kind of follow up with a more in-depth conversation around how we can look at solving some of that. As Justin mentioned, the infrastructure or the technology stack behind IQ is based on Elasticsearch, which is a very flexible data ingestion platform. So there are likely some solutions that we can look at for getting the data into the system as you wish.
And one of the things I'll mention with that is, with our API, it can consume PowerShell pushes to it. So it is a RESTful API. So if you can get a script that can pull from your older system, you know, so imagine you can go into SQL or go into the database that's generating those emails and get it to read out. You can essentially convert that through our API into an object or an alert with a health state and properties around it. So it is possible. It's not necessarily listening to an email that's pushed out to it, but so you'd have to, work with a partner of ours or work with us to get a target into that system for it. Just got another question coming in, looking at the time, see if we can get that. Do you have a solution for cloud-based service provider integrations with hardware solution?
With hardware solution, so we do integrate with the 3 primary public cloud providers, being Azure, AWS, and Google. I'm not sure specifically what the hardware part of that question might be, but we do have visibility into those public cloud platforms. We can pull in some of the infrastructure details from each of those, as well as the alerts from the monitoring that's built into those public cloud providers. Maybe that's something we could take offline or afterwards in terms of where specifically that hardware question falls.
Yeah, so for the person asking that question, or if other people have that question, feel free to reach out to us. We will probably need to go a little bit more in depth with your question as to what solutions you guys have hardware-wise running right now. Keep in mind, Martello IQ does not go direct to the hardware itself. There's generally a good need to have a monitoring platform between us and the hardware in the end. Although that said, if you're good with PowerShell or scripting, that is possible. All right, I think those are the questions for now. I just want to thank Chris very much for calling in from his summertime in Sweden. It's been a pleasure talking to you again, sir. And Rob, thanks very much for calling from Ottawa. And for those of you who've joined in from around the world, thanks very much for the time. And again, keep an eye out for more of these great webinars and good content for you. Thanks very much. Thanks, team.
Thanks, everyone.
Until next time.